Hello, everyone. I'm Kathi Kellenberger. I'm the co-leader of the data platform WIT group, along with Mahadevan, and we are
Hello.
here today to talk to Kimberly L. Tripp, who is a pre-con speaker at the upcoming PASS Data Community Summit. So, Kimberly, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your pre-con's about.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you, Mala. This is great to be joining you and being a part of the women in technology in general. I mean, it's not like I had to work to be as part of women in technology. It's kind of a default, but I love that we have such a strong community of women in technology that are speaking at the conference, that we get to talk to, on Twitter and in so many different ways and interact, even though we're not in person this year. But I love this ability for all of us to interact. So thank you for having me. My session at PASS, my workshop at PASS, is about statistics. And I get an interesting look from a lot of people when I say that I'm going to talk about statistics. They kind of go, is this going to be an extended nap for me? Am I going to be so bored that I just sleep the day? And I think that's why I kind of love this topic is I I never go into a customer without finding either statistics that are out of date or statistics that are dealing with skewed data or statistics that haven't been updated or statistics that maybe have problems because of the churn of the data. And it's not super intuitive how to deal with all of those things, but there are ways to deal with a lot of different statistics problems. And of course, the first problem you always have to figure out is it really statistics or not? So I kind of start the day with, is this problem a caching problem? Is it a problem that you've got in memory because it's from another plan that they analyzed and came up with, hey, I should use this index, but now that we're using this plan again and again, maybe I shouldn't be using this. Like, how did we get there? And usually we call those I can't even say it, parameter sensitive queries, or PSP, parameter sensitivity problems, or parameter sniffing problems. There's so many different terms that people have used. So I start with that. And once you know that it's not a caching problem, because to be honest, the caching problems are incredibly common. I can't think of a customer where I haven't had parameter sensitivity problems. But once you know it's statistics, then the question is, what about the statistics are the problem? And so I work the day through looking at the statistics, looking at what the histogram has in it, and why the histogram is limited to 200 steps, because people always ask me, well, maybe we need more steps. And why doesn't SQL Server allow more than this? So, the first thing we have to do is kind of get an idea of what the purpose of statistics actually is, why they need to be small to be efficient, and what that does in terms of future problems, in terms of estimates, in terms of updating. And so it's a really, it's not boring, but actually fun. And I would even argue enlightening session, because people start to realize some of the problems they've fixed with what I call sledgehammer fixes. Like they just update the stats because they see the problem and they see that updating stats seems to fix the problem. So they get these kind of false positives, but they think what they're doing works. So they just kind of hit the sledgehammer and they keep going, okay, I'm going to update stats. I'm going to update stats. I'm going to update stats. Or they go and they rebuild indexes, or they go and they clear cache, or they, restart SQL Server. I don't know. They have so many of these things that they do that they seem to work, and they're not totally sure why they're working. And I know I feel like I'm going into my workshop, but the point is, it's a day about kind of understanding why some of those things seem to work, why they don't always work, and really understanding how to do the right things to make statistics more effective, and therefore your queries better tuned, because SQL Server will know the estimates better and be able to deal with those estimates and get you better plans. So, okay, there's my quick overview. But I love it. It's a fun topic for me because I I get so many people where the light bulb goes on and they kind of say, okay, now I understand why when I did this, it kind of worked, but I still kind of had the problem. Now I see how I can really solve it.
So what level of experience do you think would be the best fit for this day?
It's a great question, because I feel like you could come into the session with not a lot of experience, as long as you grasp things like data and histograms and you're really focused. I think if you have no background in statistics or query problems, why I guess I wouldn't understand why you were there.
Right.
if you've struggled with query tuning and you've looked at statistics a little and you've kind of gone, oh, I don't really get it, then you're kind of perfect. Okay. And I do go from what I would consider 100. I don't spend that much time in 100, I have to admit, but I do give you a general direction of where we're going and a basis that I think you can build on, even if you don't have a lot of experience. But I do get pretty technical. So I would argue that, by the end of the day, you might be hearing some things that are a little more advanced, but kind of put those nuggets of knowledge in there, take some notes, study some of the extra resources I'm going to tell you to study. And then it'll all, I guess, come together with a little bit more experience. So I'd say I start at 100, but I probably only spend a half an hour to an hour at 100. Then I probably spend the bulk at 200 and 300. And then there's snippets here and there where I might touch on 400, but more telling people of other resources, like if you have this problem, this is why, and here's a resource you can learn more about that, so that they can take more time with the really deep stuff.
Yeah. So
that's my plan.
If you have queries that are running slow and you don't know why, which is everybody.
I mean, I'm not going to solve every problem, because every problem isn't statistics.
Right.
But at least, knowing, is it parameter sensitivity or is it statistics, is kind of part of the battle. And then if it's statistics, what are some of the things you can do? And there's all sorts of things that are related to stats, or even just related to certain types of queries and certain patterns. So so yes, I do think it applies to a lot of people.
A lot of people benefit.
So I talked to a few people who were interested, and they had some questions on the things that you may be covering. And I think you answered most of them in the overview, but I will ask them anyway for their sake.
Sure.
The first few questions are from Mark Wilkinson, who works with me and is a newly minted MVP as well. Mark suggested that he would like to know more mostly about how stats are structured in general, which I'm sure that's going to be
for sure.
That's going to be explained in a lot of detail.
I'm going to show DBCC show statistics, talk about the header, the density vector, the histogram, the inefficiencies of them, when they're used, like when a query can use a histogram versus when a query has to use the density vector, and kind of the key things about those components that you have to look for. So for sure. And that's kind of what some people think of as going to be the scary, boring part, but it's a lot less scary when you know what it means and when you know what those pieces are telling you. And that's what's cool. So I think, yes. So just yes.
So the other two questions he had is general guidance on sampling size based on row counts.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And this is one I'll have to defer a little bit to the workshop, because my answer is really a lot longer than I have time here, but and I don't want to give away all my secrets. No, but I kind of have an issue with large tables in general, and that's that they suffer from numerous problems, not just statistics. And so when I start to look at really large tables, I tend to find that they have multiple types of data within them. Often they have kind of the older data as well as the newer data. And the newer data is the data where we need to have the statistics updated, whereas the older data, you could argue, wow, we don't necessarily need our stats updated at all. And when our table has these varying access patterns, sometimes the best way to deal with that is to actually have multiple tables. And if you think about, especially ever increasing data, right now I had to think about it for a second. We're September, October, November as we move forward, right? Each of those months is kind of the hot, active, critical set of data. That's where we need to put most of our efforts for maintenance and updates. So my argument is sometimes to isolate those components, even down to a month, in separate tables. And as the data becomes more read mostly, or even eventually read only, then it goes into more of a static table that I can do rebuilds of stats with full scan. I can even, move them to alternate LUNs that maybe aren't my fastest, most expensive, most redundant LUNs. So I have a lot of ideas around VLTs. Yes, sometimes using sampling is a good solution, and I will talk about that. Sometimes architecturally breaking the tables down into smaller chunks where you can deal with those chunks more deliberately is better. And I actually mean separate physical tables. Even partitioning doesn't help you here. So partitioning in quotes, yes, but the specific type of partitioning that I use almost all the time is partition views, almost more than partition tables. So, but it's a great discussion, and I'll have some pictures and some diagrams kind of showing my ideal architecture for large data sets that have these varying access patterns. And then also talk about, okay, what if you can't architecturally do this? What if it's going to take you some time? Is sampling going to be okay? Is it not going to be okay? And a lot of that also depends on data. Is your data uniform and relatively consistent, or is your data very wildly skewed? And then that can create further problems. So we'll talk about that, because it might even be better to use filtered statistics rather than sampling even. So yes, it's such a it's a great question. It's just, it's such a loaded question, because there's so many different things I would want to look at and discuss and think about. So see, I told you I can't do that one in a short answer. It's just such a tough one, but there you go.
So the last question he had was a walkthrough of complex estimate scenarios, like with conjunctive and disjunctive predicates. And also I think you addressed the thing about the 30%, the default sampling and such.
Yeah, no, that's a great question too, because when you have one predicate, where color equals red, that's fairly straightforward. We can, if it's not a parameter sensitivity problem, we can use the histogram. We can end up seeing what the estimations are, and we can probably do a pretty good job. When you start to say where color equals red and shape equals round, now you're starting to bring together multiple conditions. So the question there starts to become, what's your cardinality estimation model? Because the way that we deal with multiple predicates is different across the different CEs. So I will talk about that. I'll even talk a little bit about my recommendation for migration from earlier versions, where maybe you've done a lot of tuning on the what we're calling legacy CE, which sounds bad. I hate calling it legacy, right? Because you get this feeling of, oh, the old CE, you're using that. You know what I mean? And it's not that. It's just, it's different. It's like one CE and another CE. And if you have a database that's been around since, 2012, and you've done a lot of tuning, you might be a little bit more well-tuned for the legacy CE. So when you upgrade, it might be better to like change your compatibility model to 2019, for example. That's not the number, but I'm just going to say to 2019 for now, but then use the legacy CE so that you get all the optimizer enhancements, at least to RTM, but you're using the legacy CE to do your calculations for things like conjunctive predicates. And so I did have a reason for bringing all that together. So the CE actually has a lot to do with how those predicates are dealt with. But the next question is, how do I tune when I have queries that are ANDed versus queries that are ORed together? I don't know if that's a big part of my session, but clearly it's definitely important. I will talk about it with regard to the CE. Getting into the index tuning with ANDs and ORs is a whole nother discussion, but at least how the statistics are dealt with, yes. So
awesome.
This is why I love this topic. There's so many interesting and non-intuitive. I think that's, again, kind of one of my favorite things to say is, people aren't dumb when they say they don't understand statistics or don't understand some behavior with SQL Server, because sometimes it doesn't initially make sense. It's just not intuitive. And you once you finally learn like what it is, what it's doing, how it's working, you kind of go, oh, I get it now. And it wasn't that they were dumb. They just didn't know, right? They hadn't looked at it that way. They hadn't heard about it that way. They hadn't studied it or analyzed it that way. And that's the part that I think is the light bulb moment that goes on. So that's why I love this topic. So God, I've almost done half my workshop here. No, no, I haven't. I've only been talking for like 10 minutes. So
Jeff Nowitzki wanted to know if you would be addressing skewed data sets as well as autostats, sync and async mode.
Yeah, sync and async for sure.
Yeah.
And my recommendation is often to leave async on, and almost always leave async on. And I'll talk to why, and I'll tell you why it shouldn't impact you that it's on, because you'll be doing some other things. So see, you need to make sure that you're doing the right kind of maintenance, but if you are, then async's probably fine. So that's something I'll talk to. And then skewed statistics as well. When your data is skewed and SQL's not giving you good estimates, the strategy can be to have separate tables, because that can be ideal architecturally, or use filtered stats to kind of get better estimates over specific ranges of data so that the estimates come back. So yes, that's definitely a big part about what I'll be talking about more towards the end of the day.
Awesome. So the very last question is from Meher Malakapalli, who works for Visa. He wanted to understand the correlation between query performance and histogram data, which I think you mentioned a little while ago, why people are so baffled by it.
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Can SQL Server use the histogram? Where does the information for the query come from? And how are they calculating it? Yeah, I'm definitely going to do that. I'm going to show a bunch of queries and show you in each of the different queries kind of like where the data came from. Did it come from the histogram? Did it come from a set of steps? Did it come from hitting a step? Did it come from an average in a step? Could they not use the histogram such that they had to go to the density vector? How did they use the density vector to calculate it? So yeah, that's definitely important, like understanding where SQL Server's going for the information. So yeah, definitely. And say hi to Meher.
Wow, that was quite a summary. That was awesome. Thank you. I'm glad I signed up. I signed up.
Oh, excellent, Ma. Yeah, I'm excited that you're going to be there. It's going to be fun. I mean, I don't tend to do questions verbally, but I tend to use the chat a lot. And then at the end of the day, I can open it up. I think, and now I'm going to put him on the spot, but I think Paul said he might moderate for me. So he'll hit a few questions and maybe interrupt me if there's something that I have to address. But yeah, it's going to be great fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
One of the coolest things is that it's only $200 to sign up. That is an amazing bargain.
Right.
And so I encourage everyone to check it out, see if this is the right pre-con for you. And I think it's a good fit for a lot of us. And so thank you so much, Kimberly, for spending a little bit of time with us today. And we're looking forward to your pre-con.
Yeah, Kathy, Bala, you guys are great. So, I love this Women in Technology group, and it's just, it's a really cool group to be a part of. So I thank you for everything you guys do.
Thank you for your sponsorship of us, by the way. I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah. Well, we only have 5 people in the company and 2 of them are women. So our stats are pretty good. So,
thank you, Kim.
yeah, thanks guys. Have a good day.
Bye.